Leanie had always lived a quiet life. As a ranger in a small village nestled near the edge of a deep, mysterious forest, she had grown accustomed to the peaceful sounds of nature. Her days were spent hunting and gathering, keeping the village safe from the occasional wild animal. Nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary until that one day. It all started when she ventured deeper into the forest than usual. The trees were older here, their trunks gnarled and twisted, their branches heavy with secrets. Leanie had heard stories about this part of the woods, whispers of strange magic, and things best left undisturbed, but she had never paid them much attention. She was a ranger, after all. Magic was something from old tales, not something that would ever affect her. That was until she found it. The object was small, nearly hidden beneath a pile of fallen leaves. At first, Leanie thought it was just another stone, weathered by time. But as she picked it up, a strange energy surged through her, sending a shock wave of power down her arm. The air around her seemed to crackle, and for a moment, the world felt as though it was holding its breath. She dropped the object, her heart racing, unsure of what had just happened. But when she looked at her hand, she saw something that made her freeze in shock. Her skin was glowing faintly, a soft bluish light pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "What is this?" she whispered to herself. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled. The trees around her seemed to bend as though they were alive. Leanie's eyes widened in horror. This was no ordinary object. Something was happening to her, something she couldn't control. She hurried back to the village, her mind racing with questions. But the strange sensations didn't fade. With every step she took, the magic seemed to grow stronger inside her. It pulsed through her veins, making her feel both powerful and afraid. What had she unleashed? Back in the village, Leanie tried to act normal. But it was impossible to ignore the changes. At night, her dreams were filled with strange visions, glowing symbols, and shadowy figures that whispered words she couldn't understand. The magic inside her seemed to be calling to her, pulling her towards something. But what? The next day, while gathering herbs by the river, Leanie felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The water began to ripple and churn as though something was moving below the surface. She gasped, stumbling back as a massive creature rose from the water. Its eyes glowed a fiery red, and its jagged teeth seemed to glisten in the sunlight. It was something out of her worst nightmare. Without thinking, Leanie raised her hand, the magic within her reacting to the danger. A burst of energy shot from her fingers, striking the creature in the chest. It let out a deafening roar before collapsing back into the water. The forest fell silent again. Leanie stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had never done anything like that before. The power inside her was unpredictable, dangerous even. She didn't know how she had summoned it, but she knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. That night, as Leanie sat by the fire, trying to make sense of everything, a visitor arrived at the village. He was a tall, imposing figure, cloaked in dark robes. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and there was an air of danger about him. Leanie could feel her heart race as he approached. "You found it, haven't you?" the stranger asked, his voice deep and commanding. Leanie stiffened. "Found what?" "The artifact," he said, his gaze piercing. "The one that grants power to those who are worthy or cursed." Leanie's mind raced. "Who are you?" "I am someone who knows the truth about what you found," he replied. "And I can help you control it. Or I can let it consume you. The choice is yours." Leanie felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea who this man was or what he wanted, but something about him felt dangerous. Still, his words echoed in her mind. Control the magic? Could she even do that? Before she could answer, a loud crash interrupted their conversation. The ground shook once more, and a roar filled the air. Leanie looked up, her eyes widening in fear. From the forest came a group of creatures unlike anything she had ever seen. They were massive, their skin covered in scales, their eyes glowing with malice. The stranger stepped forward, raising his hand. "It's time for you to decide, Leanie. Use the power you've awakened, or the village will fall." Leanie's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't have time to think. Without warning, she raised her hands, calling upon the magic within her. It surged through her body, stronger than ever before. A brilliant light exploded from her fingertips, blasting the creatures back into the forest. As the light faded, Leni collapsed to her knees, exhausted. The stranger was gone, and the village was safe for now. But the questions remained. What was this power inside her? Who were the creatures? And why had the stranger come? Leni didn't have answers, but she knew one thing: her life had changed forever. And whatever magic she had unlocked, it was only the beginning. Leni's life had never been ordinary, but it had always been peaceful. She was a ranger, trusted by the village to protect the borders of the great forest. For years, she had patrolled the woods, guarding against wild animals and the occasional thief. But all that changed the day she discovered the hidden forest.it began when Leni ventured deeper into the forest than ever before. The trees here were ancient, their trunks thick with age and their branches so high they seemed to touch the sky. The air felt different, thick with the weight of something unseen. Leni couldn't explain it, but she knew she was being watched. While walking along a familiar path, Leni noticed something odd: a stone, unlike any she had seen before. It lay at the base of an old oak tree, glowing faintly with an inner light. Her curiosity got the best of her. She knelt to touch it. The moment her fingers brushed the stone, a powerful energy shot through her body. It wasn't like anything she had ever felt before, both cold and warm at the same time. Her vision blurred, and for a brief moment, she saw flashes of strange symbols and faces she didn't recognize. It was as though the stone had unlocked something deep inside her, something ancient and powerful. Leni jerked her hand away, her heart racing. The stone lay still, no longer glowing. But she could feel it. The force, the power was inside her now. She stood, her mind spinning. What had just happened? Had the stone given her magic? Or had it merely opened a door to something far darker? With shaky hands, Leni picked up the stone again, but it was cold now, inert. She tucked it into her pouch, hoping to make sense of what had just occurred. But the forest around her seemed different. The trees loomed larger, and the sounds of the birds and animals seemed to fade. A strange silence hung in the air. Suddenly, a rustling noise broke the silence. Leni spun around, her senses on high alert. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, cloaked, and with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. She didn't know who this person was, but there was something deeply unsettling about them. "You felt it, didn't you?" the figure said, their voice low and almost a whisper. Leni didn't respond. Instead, she took a step back, hand instinctively reaching for the bow on her back. Her heart was pounding. She had never seen this person before, yet there was something about them that felt familiar. Uncomfortably familiar. "You don't understand what you found," the figure continued. "That stone holds more than just magic. It's a key to something much older, something that shouldn't be awakened." Leni's grip tightened on her bow, but she kept silent. What did this person mean? The stone? A key? And why was she the one to find it? The figure tilted their head, almost as if sensing her thoughts. "I can help you," they said. "But you must be willing to trust me. What you've awakened is dangerous. The forest is already reacting to your presence. It will not be long before the others come." Leni was confused and a little scared. What others? And what was this force that the figure spoke of? She didn't know if she could trust this stranger, but she knew she had to find out more. "What are you talking about?" Leni asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, lowering their hood to reveal a pale face, marked with strange tattoos. "I am one who has watched over the magic of the forest for centuries," they said. "I am one of the guardians, and I was sent here to stop you from unleashing what was meant to remain hidden." Before Leni could ask more questions, a loud crashing sound interrupted their conversation. The ground shook beneath her feet. From the shadows of the forest, strange shapes began to emerge, dark, twisted creatures, their eyes glowing red, their forms unnatural and wrong. They moved like shadows, quick and silent, but their presence sent a wave of terror through Leni. The figure beside her smiled grimly. "They're here," they said. The creatures of the ancient force. They've been waiting for someone to awaken it, and now that you have, Leanie didn't need to hear more. She had seen enough. The creatures were closing in fast, their glowing eyes fixated on her and the stone in her pouch. With a sudden burst of energy, Leanie pulled the stone from her pouch and held it out in front of her. As soon as it touched the air, the force inside her flared. A wave of energy shot from her hands, sending the creatures stumbling back. The figure beside her stepped back, eyes wide with disbelief. "What have you done?" they whispered. Leanie's heart raced. She didn't know how she had done it, but the magic was there inside her and it was powerful. The creatures hesitated, but only for a moment. They were still coming. Leanie realized that the stone had awakened something in her, something she couldn't control. She didn't know what this force was, but she knew she had to fight. The figure turned to her, their face full of regret. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. You must stop using the stone now, before it consumes you." But Leanie was already focused on the creatures, her hands crackling with power. There was no turning back. She had to protect the village, and she had to stop whatever dark force was lurking in the depths of the forest. And, in the distance, she could sense that this was only the beginning. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a red glow over the village. Leanie stood at the edge of the forest, her heart racing. It had been a quiet day, too quiet. The birds had stopped singing, and the air felt heavier than usual. Something was coming, something dangerous. She clenched her fists, the stone she had discovered now tightly wrapped in her pouch. Since she'd found it, her powers had only grown stronger, but they were also more unpredictable. Every day, she could feel the magic inside her calling, urging her to use it, but she wasn't sure if she was ready. Today, though, she knew that she had no choice. A distant rumble broke the silence. At first, Leanie thought it was thunder, but the sound was too deep, too steady. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and she instinctively reached for her bow, her senses alert. Then, the first creature appeared. It was huge, covered in dark scales that shimmered in the fading light. Its eyes glowed red, and its massive claws scraped against the ground as it moved. Leanie's breath caught in her throat. This was no wild animal. This was something much worse. More creatures followed, emerging from the shadows of the trees. There were dozens of them, each one more terrifying than the last. They were all different. Some had wings, some had multiple eyes, and some had claws long enough to tear through steel. The air smelled of sulfur, and the ground crackled with an unnatural energy. Leanie knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't let these creatures reach the village. She turned and ran toward the village center, where the elders and villagers had gathered, preparing for an attack that they didn't know was coming. As she ran, she called out to the villagers. "Get inside! Barricade the doors. The creatures are here." The village erupted into chaos. People rushed to their homes, gathering weapons and supplies, their faces filled with fear. Leanie didn't have time to reassure them. She needed to protect them. She needed to stop this threat before it was too late. When she reached the village square, she found the elder, a wise woman named Asha, standing with her staff, her face calm despite the panic around her. "We need to fight," Leanie said, her voice tight. "They're coming. There's no time left." Asha nodded. "We've known this day would come," she said. "We've prepared. But you, Leanie, you are the one who can turn the tide. The stone, use it." Leanie hesitated. The stone had given her power, but it also came with a cost. She wasn't sure if she could control it, if it would overwhelm her. But Asha's words rang in her ears. "You are the one who can turn the tide." Taking a deep breath, Leanie reached into her pouch and pulled out the stone. As soon as her fingers touched it, the power surged through her, stronger than ever before. It filled her, coursing through her veins like fire. She felt the forest respond, the trees around her shifting, the ground trembling with the energy she had awakened. Without a word, Leanie raised her hands, and a wave of energy shot from her fingertips. The air around her crackled as the creatures halted in their tracks. The magic within her surged again, and a barrier of light formed around the village, protecting it from the creatures' advance. But the creatures were not easily stopped. They snarled and growled, pounding against the barrier with all their strength. The ground beneath them shook with every blow. Leanie gritted her teeth. The magic inside her was powerful, but it was exhausting. She could feel it draining her, threatening to overwhelm her. She needed more strength, more control. She had to hold the barrier long enough for the villagers to prepare. "Fight, Leanie!" Asha shouted from behind her. "Don't hold back." Leanie nodded, her eyes locked on the creatures. She could see their glowing eyes, the hunger in them. They were determined to break through, to destroy everything. And she couldn't let that happen. Not on her watch. With a roar, Leanie unleashed all the magic she could summon. The air exploded with light as the barrier expanded, pushing the creatures back. Some of them stumbled, but many held their ground, pushing harder. The energy inside her burned hotter, and she felt her strength beginning to fade. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the village. One of the creatures had broken through the barrier. Leanie's eyes widened in horror. She couldn't let it reach the villagers. She had to stop it. Without thinking, Leanie sprinted toward the creature, the stone still clutched in her hand. The magic flared again, but this time, it was different. The stone hummed with energy, pulling her forward, guiding her. She didn't control it. A bolt of lightning shot from her fingertips, striking the creature square in the chest. It let out a terrible screech as it crumpled to the ground, lifeless. But the battle was far from over. The remaining creatures were still pushing forward, their eyes filled with rage. Leanie could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on her. Her strength was fading, but the stone it kept calling to her, urging her on. She turned to face the village. The people were ready, armed with whatever weapons they could find. They were standing together, preparing to fight. Leanie could feel their determination, their hope. She knew she couldn't do this alone. With one last cry, Leanie raised the stone high above her head, calling on every last ounce of power she had. The sky crackled, and the ground shook. The stone glowed with blinding light, and the creatures, sensing the power, hesitated. Leanie wasn't sure how long she could keep this up, but she knew one thing for certain. The battle had only just begun. Leanie had always known the forest was different, but she had never fully understood why. As a ranger, she had explored its depths countless times, but there was always something just out of reach, something hidden in its shadows. Yet, despite the mystery, the forest had never felt dangerous until now. The night had fallen swiftly, and the village was quiet. Leanie sat at the edge of the woods, her fingers tracing the outline of the stone she had found months ago. It had given her powers she never asked for and still didn't fully understand. Every day, she felt the magic inside her growing stronger, calling her deeper into the forest, urging her to uncover its secrets. But tonight was different. A strange chill hung in the air. The trees seemed to whisper, and the wind carried an unfamiliar scent, like something ancient and forgotten. Leanie couldn't ignore it. She stood, feeling the pull of the forest tug at her with a force she couldn't explain. The magic inside her stirred, a silent call that she had learned to recognize. She walked deeper into the forest, each step taking her further from the village. The path was familiar, but tonight it felt wrong. The air was thick, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Leanie's breath quickened as the magic inside her surged. She knew she was getting close. Finally, she reached a clearing she had never seen before. In the center stood a massive stone arch covered in strange symbols that pulsed with a faint glow. The magic within her throbbed, stronger than ever, as if it recognized the power of the arch. Leanie stepped closer, her heart pounding. She had never felt this kind of magic before, but she knew instinctively that it was tied to the stone she carried. It was as if the arch was calling to her, pulling her toward it. Before she could touch it, a voice echoed from the shadows. "You shouldn't be here." Leanie spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for her bow. The voice was familiar, one she'd heard only in her dreams. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure cloaked in darkness. She couldn't see their face, but their presence was undeniable. "Who are you?" Leanie demanded, her voice shaking. She could feel the tension in the air, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face she recognized: Asha, the elder who had guided her since she was a child. But this was not the Asha she knew. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her once kind face was now stern and unreadable. "You've awakened something you don't understand," Asha said, her voice cold. "The magic you carry, it's not just a gift. It's a curse." Lini's heart raced. "A curse? What do you mean? I didn't ask for this power." Asha shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The magic you've unlocked is older than the world itself, and it has a purpose. A purpose that will destroy everything if left unchecked." Lini took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. She had always felt the magic inside her, felt it grow stronger each day, but she had never imagined it was something that could hurt others, something that could destroy everything. "But how do I stop it?" Lini asked, her voice barely a whisper. Asha's eyes darkened. "You can't. Once the magic is unleashed, it cannot be contained. The only way to stop it is to destroy the source." Lini's mind raced. She had to make a choice: use the magic to fight against what it had awakened, or risk letting it consume everything. The forest around her seemed to shift, the shadows deepening, as if the world itself was waiting for her decision. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The arch in front of Lini cracked, and a bright light exploded from within, sending a shockwave through the clearing. Lini stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest. The magic had already begun to grow beyond her control. Asha's face twisted in anguish. "It's too late. The world will fall to the magic now." Before Lini could react, the ground split open, and a dark figure emerged from the rift. It was massive, its form shifting and changing, like a creature made of shadows. Its eyes burned with a fiery hatred as it let out an ear-splitting roar. Lini could feel the power inside her flare in response, but she couldn't control it. The stone, the magic, it was too much. She was being pulled into a battle she wasn't ready for. The reality of what she had unleashed was now clear. "Fight!" Asha shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Use the magic, Lini. It's the only way to stop it." Lini hesitated. Could she truly fight this creature, this force, with the magic inside her? The stone pulsed in her hand, urging her forward. She had no choice. With a cry, Lini raised her hands, and a surge of power shot from her fingertips. The creature shrieked as the magic collided with it, but it didn't fall. Instead, it seemed to absorb the magic, growing stronger with each blast. Lini's heart sank. She had thought she could control the magic, but now she realized that it was beyond her. The more she used it, the more it twisted, turning into something dark, something she couldn't understand. Asha stepped forward, her face full of sorrow. "This was never meant to happen. You cannot fight what you've awakened. The magic will destroy you." Lini could feel the truth in her words, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't let everything she loved be destroyed. The magic surged again, wild and uncontrollable. But this time, it was different. As the magic exploded from her, something inside Lini broke free. She no longer felt afraid. She didn't know if she could control the magic, but she knew she couldn't let it win. The battle had only just begun. The sky above the village had turned a strange shade of purple, and Lini could feel the tension in the air. The creatures from the forest were still lurking at the edge of the trees, their glowing eyes watching her, waiting. She had never felt so powerless before, despite the magic inside her. She stood at the village gate, her hand on the stone that had given her powers, but now it felt cold. The power it had once granted her seemed to be fading, slipping away. It was as if the stone no longer recognized her, no longer cared for her. The elder, Asha, stood beside her, her face grim. "The magic you carry has a purpose, Lini. But the time has come for you to make a choice. The creatures you face, they are not the real threat. The magic itself is the danger." Lini turned to Asha, confusion and fear in her eyes. "What do you mean? How can the magic be the danger? I thought it was the key to stopping the creatures." Asha shook her head. "The creatures are a symptom of something much darker. The magic within you, it was never meant for this world. It has a mind of its own, and it will consume everything unless you stop it. Leonie felt her heart sink. Stop it? How am I supposed to stop it? The stone, the magic, it's all I have. Without it, I can't protect the village. Asha placed a hand on Leonie's shoulder. You must decide. Use the magic to fight and risk everything. Or you can destroy it and free yourself from its grip, but in doing so, you may lose the power you need to save everyone. Leonie's mind raced. The choice was impossible. She had always known that the magic was dangerous, but she had never imagined that it could be the very thing that would destroy the world. She had always trusted it, relied on it, but now she wasn't so sure. A loud roar from the edge of the forest broke her thoughts. The creatures were getting closer. They had already breached the village's outer defenses, and it wouldn't be long before they reached the heart of the village. She could feel their presence, feel the darkness they carried with them. You don't have much time, Asha said softly. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to make the right choice. Leonie's fingers tightened around the stone. It pulsed with power, as if urging her to make a decision. The magic was calling to her, tempting her to use it, but she could feel the weight of Asha's words pressing down on her. If she used the magic, would she be condemning everyone to destruction? Would she be turning the power against herself? A flash of memory crossed her mind, her family, her village, all the people she had sworn to protect. She had always fought for them, always put their safety above her own. But now, the magic was forcing her to choose, to risk it all, or to let go. She looked up at Asha, her face set with determination. I will destroy the magic. I have to. Asha's face softened, a look of sorrow in her eyes. Are you sure? Once you destroy it, there will be no going back. You will be just like everyone else, weak, helpless. Leonie nodded, her grip tightening on the stone. I'd rather be weak and free than powerful and controlled by something I don't understand. Asha stepped back, giving Leonie space. Then do it. But know this, whatever you choose, the creatures will come. And without the magic, you'll have to fight them with everything you have. Leonie turned toward the creatures, who were now emerging from the shadows of the forest. They were larger than she remembered, their eyes glowing with an evil light. They were relentless, unstoppable, and they were coming for her. Leonie held the stone high above her head. This is the end. With a deep breath, she focused all her energy into the stone. She could feel it vibrating with power, the magic inside her fighting to stay alive. But Leonie was stronger. With one final push, she slammed the stone into the ground. The ground shook, and a blinding light erupted from the stone. For a moment, Leonie couldn't see anything, just light, pure and overwhelming. The magic screamed in protest, but she held firm. She wasn't going to let it control her anymore. When the light faded, the stone was gone. It had disintegrated into nothingness. Leonie looked down at her hands, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The magic was gone. But so was her power. The creatures stopped moving, their eyes narrowing in confusion. They didn't know what had happened, but they could sense the change. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, they charged. Leonie's heart raced, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed a sword from the armory, her grip strong despite the absence of magic. She ran toward the creatures, her body moving on instinct, her training kicking in. The battle was fierce. Leonie fought with everything she had, using the strength and skill she had honed over the years. She wasn't as powerful as she had been, but she was still a ranger. And she was still capable of protecting her people. Hours passed and the creatures slowly began to retreat. They were still dangerous, but with the magic gone. Leonie had done it. She had chosen to give up the magic, and in doing so, she had freed herself from its grasp. The village was safe, for now. But as Leonie stood in the ruins of the battle, her sword still in hand, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right choice. The magic was gone, but at what cost?